Welcome everybody to our Oracle Database Improving FME Interoperability webinar. This is the third of 3 webinars that we've done on the major database formats and over the past few months, and so we're pulling some of the ideas together, and today we're going to focus on Oracle. So I'm here today with Steve McCabe.
Good morning everyone, and afternoon, and evening.
And I'm Robin Rennie, the FME Support Desktop Manager, and we've got also along with us Mark Stokes, who's the Professional Services Manager, and he's here to do question and answer and help us out in the background here with this webinar. So we really want you to ask questions as we go through, and so the way that you do this is in your GoToWebinar pane. There's a tab there for questions, and so you submit your question and Mark will get back to you. And if he doesn't get to you during the webinar, we'll send you a follow-up email afterwards answering any remaining issues that you might have. So feel free to fire those questions off.
Okay. All right. So today, for those that are new to FME, we're going to be talking about the feature manipulation engine, the power behind our products here at Safe Software. We're currently supporting over 300 different formats in 2013, and as well as 400 data transformation tools, and that's what helps us translate this spatial data from one format to another. We work with many different formats around the spatial arena and non-spatial arena. Today we're going to be focusing on the database, and in particular the Oracle Spatial Database. We're going to be working with Small Word a little bit, pulling some data out of there, and another GML, other formats going out to CAD and whatnot, so we'll see some of that. Okay, and so with FME, what we have is a graphical authoring environment, or if you want to look at it a little differently, you could say it's a development environment that allows you access through a graphical interface where you can drop these transformer tools we mentioned in the previous slide onto your canvas, and that can allow you to manipulate your source data coming from the left through this workflow out to the right. Okay, so it looks like we're ready for Robin to fire up the first poll of the day. We really want to get a feel for the, what's the crowd about, what's your level of FME expertise, so that we can kind of maybe apply that and dive a little deeper in places where possible.
Yeah, it just helps us decide how to sort of work through the examples, what level of detail to go into if we know the kind of audience that we've got. So feel free to tap the button. We usually get a bunch of people here that are experts. We seem to have a following on our webinars, almost like I don't know, a Twitter feed. People follow our webinar feed. So yeah, we always end up with a few experts, but it's great to know what people out there are doing. So I'll just give you a couple of seconds more, and then we'll close that poll and share it with you all. And share it. So looks like, Steve, we've got quite a number of novices today, so we'll have to
tone it down a little bit.
Speak a little slower and show you some of the more basic stuff that we can do. But that's great.
Okay.
So if you are really new to FME, what we really recommend you doing, sorry, I have to get rid of the poll, is going to our Getting Started page. We've got some wonderful resources for you there on our web page. This is also available if you go to safe.com. Right on our home page, one of the 2 buttons there is a Getting Started button, and that is a link through to these webinars, some little demo videos showing you how to get started. It's a link to the training page that shows you where all the courses are and things like that. In addition, once a week on a Thursday morning, we run a weekly desktop overview webinar, which is just a very short 1-hour webinar, and it is actually run by a live person whom you can ask questions to during that webinar. So that's a really good place also to get some introductory feedback and to get you started. It is a complex product. It has a fairly large learning curve, but boy, we've got some resources out there that you can use.
Okay, so Robin, we got our next poll.
Great. So here we want to know what you're doing with your databases and what kind of frustrations that you might run into in your current workflows that we may be able to help you out with in terms of using FME. So this is a select all that apply poll, and so click away happily, and we'll see what kinds of issues people are having.
Yeah, we got.
Usually it comes down to the fact that you have to know SQL. When you're working with databases, this seems to be a fairly common requirement, that you have to have a really heavy understanding of the database and all its tools and opportunities. And that's one of the things that FME is really good at removing from you. That's
right. Yeah, there's some transformers in there that allow people that aren't familiar with SQL to do some pretty nifty stuff with the database. And as well, the great thing about FME is so flexible. You can, if you are familiar with SQL, you can start to use some of that for some other neat stuff you can do with FME.
Okay, I think we'll close that one off, and we'll share it with you so you can see that, again, it comes down to having to work with your DBAs, having to ask permission to be able to get at your database, whereas, really you know what you want to do, and you don't want to have to put through that work order that's going to take 6 months to get back to you. And so one of the other problems, switching between files when you're switching between databases or having to create intermediary files. So let's look at your examples and our agenda for the day, and we'll see what we're going to be covering.
Yeah, so first off, what we're working with today is FME 2013, SP1, SP2. We got Oracle 11G, and we're going to be working with the FME Oracle Edition. Actually, one particular one is on SP1 that's going to be running the Small World Edition. The rest of these are basically can be all done with the Oracle level edition.
And you need the Oracle level edition if you're going to be writing to Oracle Spatial. If you're just reading from Oracle, then you can get away with the lower level licenses.
That's a very good point. That's
a
very good
point.
So
it's for writing Oracle Spatial data,
you
have to have an Oracle level license. Someone just commented on that we should stop picking on the DBAs, and you're dead right. They perform a valuable
my experience with DBAs, they're awesome people. They know what they're doing. They do a fantastic job.
Yeah. So we will stop picking on the DBAs.
Yeah. Okay. Another poll coming up here. We're trying to get the polls out of the way earlier in this broadcast. We find that people will pay attention a little better to the polls up front than they do halfway through when we're in the middle of a demo.
So here we're just looking for the kinds of database activities that you might be using, or you might want to use FME for. So, and of course, remember, we're not just, although we work heavily within the spatial field, we're not just doing spatial stuff here. We are also working with non-spatial data. And so if you've got data there that you need to do data validation on, or you might have geometry in your Oracle, and so you need to do geometry validation, etc. And so, in addition, of course, probably reading's probably the most popular, would be my guess, although it does look like we've got a huge crowd that actually are trying to write to their databases as well.
Excellent.
So let me just close that one off, and we'll share it with you.
Those brave souls.
Yeah. So you can't quite see the yellow. Oh, you can see it better up there.
Yeah.
The yellow is coming through there.
Yes, an interesting mix. Yeah.
That's great. Okay, so what have you got next here, Steve?
All right, so just to kind of give us a little intro to what we're going to be going through, we're going to go through several demos, reading and writing, some tips and tricks, doing some editing and change detection, Oracle Server functionality. We're going to show you a workspace storing rasters, point clouds, multiple geometry columns, how to work with that. Some of the database transformers that are available for working with Oracle and Oracle Spatial. And as well, just to say at the end of it, there will be a follow-up email where you'll get a link to the webinar and any of the workspaces and materials that are applicable to share. We'll be passing those out as well. Okay, so do you want to talk about the Zipster?
Basically, we're going to move in now to our warp speed demos. The little Zipster character was our sort of logo for the world tour that we've just recently completed. Many of you may have come to some of our sessions as we flitted around the world introducing FME 2013. So then the newest capability in FME 2013 was to be able to read from zipped containers or straight from URLs. So that was the big thing with our little Zipster. And it makes life so much easier. If I want to read from a shapefile, I don't have to unzip it anymore. I can just point right to the zip folder and away it goes. So Just a little sidebar note there.
Yeah, exactly. So we'll get into the demos now. So I'm going to jump over here to my small world machine that's locked.
And the only reason we're using Small World in this example is because it handles multiple geometry columns. And one of the things we wanted to show you was how FME can read and manipulate multiple geometry columns. So Small World, that's been native in Small World for a long time. It's also a capability that Oracle has, and so we'll show you how to use FME to read from multiple spatial columns and write to multiple spatial columns, and just generally deal with data that's in multiple geometry columns.
Yeah, so we'll just take you through the workspace here. So what we've got over here on the right-hand side, we've got a small world reader, and this is going into the database. I got a couple icons in the way here. Just scroll up to the top. So we can see we're going to be reading from there, and then we're going to be writing from there. Now this is in two parts. So the first part, what I'm going to do is disable all these, and I'm going to show you a little bit about the SQL creator. We'll enable all these objects. And in this SQL creator is one of the transformers. We're kind of jumping a little bit ahead, but showing you this transformer here. But this is one of the transformers that allows you to interact with the spatial databases. So in here you can put in native PLSQL code and have it do what you need to do. Pretty powerful little piece of functionality there. So I just got to check something.
So what Steve's doing there is building tables for us that hold multiple geometry columns. And the reason is that we can't sort of do that in FME under the hood, but we can do it by setting up a set of SQL statements to do that writing for us.
Yeah, that's right. So yeah, that's the pretty nice flexibility there with that. I just want to see something here. Let me just refresh this and see. Okay, so I don't need to do that.
Steve's got a rather complicated setup here. He works on a Macintosh, which leaves the rest of us feeling a bit cold, and so consequently he's got VMs and databases and all kinds of cool stuff. So
sometimes I get confused with it all. But one thing to mention over here as well, when you fire up this and you make a connection, you get the database tables. You've got functions over here that you can drag into the canvas and that sort of stuff. So that's pretty nifty for people that are maybe somewhat familiar with the syntax they might want to use. But this allows you to do a lot more with it. So, and
there's even a link right within these sections that actually goes to the real reference manual. So if you're a bit confused about the SQL aggregate functions, you can click on the online help there, and it will take you right out to the online help. Don't do that right now.
Yeah, no.
That's something you can do.
All right. Yeah, go ahead.
No, go for it.
Yeah. So that's kind of nice to know. So in this case, we could run that, and that would create our tables. I've already done that, so I'm not going to bother with that this morning. And then we'll enable that down here. Now, a small world, it allows you to do this nifty thing where you can compare an alternative with another alternative and checkpoints and see changes to the data. So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to look at the deltas between that, and then what that's going to do is fire up the data, and we're going to see some changes happening in here when I do a refresh on that. Well, I hope. So down here, to show you how we're working with that multiple geometries as well as we go through this, I'll run that in a second. This is where we've got a feature that's got a multiple geometry on it, so we have to turn on two things here. Is there a multiple? No, we don't have to do that on FME on the small world side. It's just only on the Oracle side that we need to do that on, so that the writer knows it's dealing with multiple geometry columns. And that's how we do that. We set that here, and then we give our center lines, the geometry columns, a name. This is actually this feature here particularly doesn't have the two columns of geometry, but this one does. And I'm not even writing that one out, so we'll go down here. Location is one geometry column, and the label is the second geometry column. So when we look at the syntax of that, we'll see that those columns have geometry columns, multiple geometry columns when we review it. So we're doing some copying the attributes across, the orientation from those labels out to that writer. null attribute replacer, and then we're renaming. FME is kind of case sensitive in this regard. If you want to have nice green arrows here, you'll rename them like that. And that's pretty much it with it. There's a couple other features on the writer that you always want to be aware of. That's one is dropping the table or truncating the table, and the other is creating the table. So you may be running against a new database. You want to make sure that you're going to create that table, and that's by default usually yes. But you may be also writing to a table that has existing tables, and you certainly don't want to have your, you know, if you happen to leave this at the default setting, it will show you here a drop, and you could very well have that unexpectedly sat there. And if you got the right permissions in the database, which a good DBA would make sure you don't, you would be able to mess up some things in there. So we're not going to do that.
Yeah, so it's very important for those of you that are FME users but may not have dabbled in the database world. That's one of the things that with database reading and writing, it's extremely important to check those additional tabs in the reader and writer. Check the parameters that are in the navigator pane. Check the parameters that are on those in the writer feature types, because it isn't as easy as working with shape or map info tab. There's way more options, and you need to be aware of what's going on.
Yeah, and so as we tie these two particular databases together, we're going to be reading, finding out the differences in the Small World database, and we're going to be applying those deltas to the existing features in the database here. So one thing you need to do when you're doing the FME DB operations and FME wares is you need to make sure that your writer mode is set to the correct update mode. If it's set to insert, anything that the writer sees will always just end up as an insert. With this, you'll get your deletes, your inserts, and your updates as you expect them to be. Okay, so I'm going to prompt and run. I got a few parameters here on the alternatives, and we're just going to prompt and run that. With localhost, so we're going to look at the source alternative as under FME and a checkpoint in there called FME. And we're going to compare that to the the baseline alternative, and that's just going to give us some deltas here. Let's give this a run. I meant to redirect the visualizer there, but that's okay. All right, so I've got an inspector on there somewhere, so that's opened up that. Now we'll see if we come in here. It would have been nice for me to, you know what, I'm going to run that a second time, but this time I'm going to run it so we can look at what's happening to the data that's coming out of this. So this time I'm just redirecting it to it, the visualizer, and we'll get everything coming out. And hopefully we'll see, yeah, there's our information. Oh, we're not seeing our geometry. Oh, yeah, there it is. It's the yeah, but let's go back to the workspace and get rid of that. Run that one more time. Never works as smooth as the second time. All right, so there's the data we got. And if we look at that, interrogate, see what's going on here, we're going to see some of these DB operations, FME DB operations, that are going to be occurring. And in this case, the insert, that's going to be an insert. There may be a few updates in here, but I'm not really sure where those are. And then we'll also see some deletes happening as well. So very basically instructing the Oracle database what to do with the writer to do when it hits the database. So now, after I've run that in there, I should be able to go to this first view. Oops. I got to open up. No, the other. Oh yeah, there it is. And if I refresh this now, I should see this new data that's come in here. Well, I'm getting some of it, but not all of it now. It's interesting. So, in essence, we would be seeing some of our data there. Some of it come out. It's like we're missing some of the geometry on that. So that's okay, but we should have got another piece of information coming up there that looks something like this. If we come here. So we won't show it, but that's what we should have gotten in there. So at the moment, not seeing that come up in my Oracle database. So, okay, so that's a little bit about how you can write to your Oracle database using the FME DB operation. Make sure the key points, takeaways, the writer modes change so the FME DB operations get rectified or get recognized, and also be careful about what you're doing with your feature types here, if you're creating them or dropping them, whatnot. And also your update column needs to be set. You can set that in the workflow, but you also, and when you're using the FME DB operation and the FME where, you need to have that set there as well. Another area that's really good to be aware of is when you're dealing with multiple geometry columns, you're going to have to use that in conjunction with these transformers here, the multiple geometry setter and the geometry property setter. Okay?
Sure, that sounds good. So what else have you got for us next?
All right, so let's go back to here. So, oops. So next is my SQL executor.
So we promised you that you wouldn't have to know SQL when you're working with FME, and right away we've started off by showing you examples where you do. So we just really want to get that out of the way so that you can then
sit back and relax.
Sit back and relax. But one of the nice things with the ability to actually interact with the database with your own SQL commands is often that's what you're most comfortable with, and you're used to working that way. And so we do give you the options within FME to be able to access your databases that way.
Yeah, and here's another example of some SQL. Maybe your DVA is nice to you and it gives you a nice join that you want to use all the time. So in this case here, in the Oracle database we're working with, we've got a couple of tables, the customer table and the supply point, and we can run this on that and see our data come back to us.
So this is an example of using a SQL statement that you've been familiar with for a long time, actually within FME, and extracting that data out and displaying it. While you're in there, Steve, isn't there something new with the Data Inspector that our database people are really going to enjoy?
They will. And let's just see if we can pull that up. It's called Table View. So we'll get that. I give that a second. Or get an empty table. No.
Do you not have any attributes on that table?
Well, let's just look. Oh, it's because it's coming from the visualizer. So we're a little premature there. We need to wait till we get some data.
Anyway, those of you that are familiar with FME and may never have tried the Data Inspector because it has been in development for a number of recent releases, you might want to take a look at it now because we've added this new table viewer into it, which now shows your non-spatial data in a format that's way more familiar to you.
Yeah, let's just pull up a couple of those just to show you what we're talking about. So a lot of people that are new to FME would be thinking, what, you didn't have a table viewer? But the rest of us, yeah, you're right, we didn't have it. So
partly because we came from the spatial background where really people wanted to see the geometry, but now as we've moved into the non-spatial, particularly things like CSV files or Access, a table viewer is really useful. And so you can now sort by those different columns, you can select the data from those columns, etc. And so your table viewer is there in FME 2013 Service Pack 1, and it's really, really useful.
Yeah, and you can see here too, it links between the graphical and the non-graphical, or your table view and the graphical view there. You can see it. I don't know if you can see it very well on your guys' screen there. I'm not hitting, but if I click on one of these up here, these longer pieces of pipe, you can see that it highlights it in the table view. So pretty cool stuff. Okay, so this here SQL executor is showing us that join. So that's, again, more SQL that we were trying not to scare people away with, but it's good to know that you can do that sort of stuff. And then we'll get out of this one. We'll get into our next workspace, which is another example of SQL executor.
Well, this one is an example of loading data that you might have had in a text file. So you've been given a text file with a whole lot of insert statements, and in the past it's been a bit, we hadn't sort of figured out how you can do that, but with a text line reader, what you're able to do is read that text file and take each one of the statements within that text file pass it into a SQL executor, and it will execute those statements for you. So this is really the reverse of a SQL loader. We've never had a SQL loader reader. We've been able to write out SQL loader statements for you, but using this technique, you'll be able to read them back in again.
Yeah, so here's the actual SQL file, or the insert statements, or the statements that we're going to be running through that SQL executor. You can see here we're actually dropping tables, creating a sequence and whatnot. And so if we run that, all we're doing is reading that text line file in, and we're running it through the SQL executor, and then that's going to be doing instructions on the database. And it logs any of the bad statements out here. You will get a feedback from that. At this stage, it's just running through and it's telling us what it's doing. So we can scroll up here and have a quick peek before we move on. You can see there some of the inserts that were happening there. So that's a pretty powerful way to, kind of take some scripting files and put them into use. One thing I will note, you'll see here there's no semicolons at the end of this. In this particular file, we do not need that. So you just, in each individual statement would be sent to the database with that explicit or implicit semicolon on the end. So now what I'm going to do is show you another way of getting some more data in here. We're going to disable all these objects. And this time we're going to read from a CSV file, which is going to look a little bit different. And I think I've got that open. Yeah, this is the comma separator file here that we're going to be loading. So in this case here, we've got some coffee shops we're going to be throwing in there. And notice the Tim Hortons for all those Canadians out there in the crowd. And this time we're going to take, this one's a little bit more involved, but what we're doing is we're going to go to the database. And this is kind of an example of showing you where you can start to look at your sequences that you want to use in your insert statements and how you can integrate that into your workflow within FME. This here just goes to the database and it finds the next value for the sequence. Now this may not be a great example of how we would use this kind of functionality to get a next sequence value, because you might want to use it, for instance, in other ways like pick lists and lookup tables and whatnot, where you want to use that value in the rest of your inserts. So what I'm doing here, whoops, oh that's weird.
I think you're all seeing pretty pictures off. Oh, that's because we need to wiggle the other mouse here. We've got enough equipment in this room.
You guys are seeing everything you should. It's just us here that's not seeing on our big screen what we expected. We started panicking. So all we're doing here is taking one particular feature that's coming out of that file, running it through here. That's going to hit the database and get that sequence value. It's going to set it to the variable setter. And now we're passing everything else through the variable retriever to pull that back, and it's going to associate that onto those. We're going to then do some funky wonkies with the counter here. So we're going to add 10 to that, so you'll see that in the database, and I'll pull up the SQL developer here in a second. So let's just, where is it? SQL developer. So this is the customers table now before I run anything against it. There's nothing in there. And then we'll run this. I should have run, oops, I'm on the wrong one. Oh, I see what's going on. So we'll run that.
The other thing we're doing here is that CSV file had lat long columns in it, and we took those columns and turned them into geometry. So you'll have noticed in that workspace that he had a 2D point replacer, which was taking that non-spatial data and turning it into spatial data.
All right, so if I scroll down to the bottom here, we'll see the new data. In fact, I think I've duplicated because I didn't drop the table like I would have expected to. And so we can see, it's at the bottom. Oh, that's weird. Okay, let's go back to my workspace. What happened there? Did it go into the redirect? Should have inserted 18 for us. Okay, I'm not sure what took place there.
Which table was it updating there?
Customers.
Yes, customers. Okay.
Yeah.
So, did you do a refresh on your SQL developer?
Well, let's just go back and have a look. I don't even know what the idea would be.
Well, down the bottom there should be a bunch of customers that have an actual coffee tot. So there you are. I saw them right.
Oh, you saw them? Okay.
Yeah. So somewhere in there was some where the coffee type wasn't null. It had a value of Tim Hortons or Delaney's or whatever.
So. Yeah, there you go.
So there are your new customers, and you'll notice that the ID field has been bumped up a bit. So it's because we took the last valid ID field and then we added 10 to it so we could separate that data out. So anyway, more examples of actually still trying to use SQL statements to do things. So what you got next,
Steve? So come back to my virtual machine here. Did that one, the geometry validator. Now we've got a couple here. If I look at the geometry validator, do you want to? Okay, yeah. So one of the things that happens a lot with databases is just the whole. Well, I get it. Is looking at the
Yeah, let's just catch up with ourselves here because we went off-roading there for a little bit. So back up one or two there, Steve, and let's just say some of the things that we have done. So we did talk about working with multiple spatial columns and showed you how to create complex tables using SQL statements from within FME. We talked a little bit about the FME DB operation, which is for working with incremental updates. That kind of processing is fairly complex, and if you're going to be doing that, then I recommend you either work through the tutorial or come to our spatial databases course.
Yep.
So then some of the tips and tricks with working with data, especially when you're writing, is that it's always a really good idea to use a unique key field. If you're going to be interacting with some of the other products like ArcMap or GeoMedia or some of those kind of things where you're going to be pulling this data into a viewing capability, they always seem to require a unique key field, right, when you're working with the data. And of course, that's always good database practice too. One of the other options that's available on a writer is the ability to set a transaction interval. So we can actually control when and how features are committed to the database. So for instance, if you want to commit your write on every single feature that you're dealing with, then you would set the transaction interval to 1 so that each feature would be committed.
And we'll show you that next time we have the reader up as well.
Yeah, but then in the other hand, if you want to be able to control sort of rollbacks and how the features are being written to the database, you can also set that commit interval very, very high. So you can set a transaction to, say, 99 million, and then that means that those features won't be committed until the process is actually finished working.
So any error in that process would roll everything back.
Them all back. So there's some transactioning capability within the product to allow you to do that kind of thing.
Yeah. And a couple other things to keep in mind too, when you're reading from the Oracle database, you really want to make sure that you're utilizing the indexes. If there are some columns you're querying on regularly and they don't have indexes, you're going to see that hit just like you would from any application. FME will get affected by that as well. Spatial indexes, a lot of opportunities for us to offload the spatial queries, spatial analysis onto the Oracle database and only pull back a subset of what we need instead of us pulling the whole entire data across to FME and then doing the processing, which can happen, and maybe it can be a performance improvement if it's a smaller subset of data that you're dealing with. But when you're working with large data sets, you definitely want to try to offload that to Oracle.
So one of the side bars to that note is that when we're reading from Oracle, we also read from views, just the same way we would read from tables. And if you're working with spatial views, there isn't the ability to put a spatial index onto a view. So you will find that you get that performance hit quite severely if you're trying to do spatial relationship type things on views. And so we really recommend that you take a look at perhaps using materialized views instead so that you can get that spatial capability.
Yeah, those views that have a lot of joins underneath of it is really where you're going to see some painful performance problems, and that's where materialized views can really help you with that as well.
That's right. So basically, when we show you the list of tables in our table picker, they will include views if you have been granted access to those views.
Yeah. And also now, when you're writing to Oracle, I'm going to show you, hopefully try to show you a couple of workspaces where we allow you, different ways of working with constraints. One, it's maybe the order that you're writing to the Oracle database, or two, the ability to be able to drop your constraints temporarily, do your data load, then re-enabling those constraints with some validation after the fact. Large data sets that you're loading, especially with spatial indexes, you want to consider dropping those before you start your load, if possible. Sometimes it's not possible for you to do that, but you will have some overhead working with large data sets during loads with spatial indexes and non-spatial indexes on there. Quite often it's better for you to drop and re-index those afterwards, and that's something in FME as well you could do with the post and the pre and the post translation scripts. So. Okay.
So we showed you how to use the SQL executor and the SQL creator for doing joins and things, but then we do have these other transformers that don't require you to know the SQL statement. So there's two transformers out there that will let you do joins between different tables in your databases. So one is called the joiner, which allows you to join on multiple attributes, but it is only non-spatial data. So what's returned to you is attribute information out of the tables.
Yeah. The nice thing on the feature merger, again, you can have a request go in, and for every requirement goes out.
Yeah, so the feature merger just takes your streams of data, merges them on an attribute, and passes them through the process. So again, no requirement to write any SQL. So you've read the two tables, picked out the attribute you want to join the data on, and passed it through the feature merger.
Yeah, and the feature reader, working with spatial and non-spatial queries, that's I don't have that demo to show today.
Oh, don't you?
No.
Okay. So the feature reader is a very powerful transformer that allows you to do reading of your data midstream in your workspace. So you have, for instance, one Oracle table that might be, or even a shapefile that might be a bounding area of what you're interested in, and you can use the feature reader to go and read just the features that fit within that bounding area. So you can do that kind of spatial relationship while you're reading the features in.
And the geometry validator, this is the one where we know with some of the database formats they're very forgiving with what we can throw in, so we can put a lot of garbage in there, and then when we try to work with that data, we have lots of different issues with it. SQL Server is a good one for that. It's very forgiving for what can be put in there. Oracle will traditionally allow you to do some fun things like null geometries can get put in there and whatnot. So this is a way for us to try to rectify any of the data that is going in there and fix it and reinsert it or update it.
So those of you that are familiar with FME will remember the old OGC geometry validator. In FME 2013, we completely reworked that transformer to allow it to do a whole lot of new tests on geometry validation. We also combined a couple of the transformers into it, so you'll find that the self-intersector has disappeared and it's now rolled into the geometry validator. So this allows you to do things like check for self-intersections in 2D. It will allow you to check for duplicate consecutive points. And the really nice thing is that it shows you where that bad occurrence is in your data. So when you pass your stuff through the geometry validator, we can either repair it for you or we can just look at it, but we will tell you where the issues are. Yeah. And so you can perform multiple tests here or just a single test. Sometimes you still need to string them together because what you've repaired in a first test may create bad features for a subsequent test. So you do have to play with it a little bit, get used to using it, but it's got some very powerful testing. It also works in 3D. You can do things like test for invalid solids or surfaces and things like that. What we are also looking to do is actually add tests or issues that are, say, Oracle specific or Esri specific, and that's something we will continue to work on as we improve the geometry validation process. So if you've got examples of what you might like to use this for and it's not quite doing the right things, let us know. We're still, as I said, working on this particular transformer. Yeah. And you have the option there to repair the stuff. So down the bottom, you can set it to yes or no, depending on whether or not you want to repair the issues.
Yeah. You see over here on the each of these transformers how flexible, you know, what's happening to the data as it goes through this. You get the data of the past when it's there is no problems with it, and then but you want to make sure you have some kind of connection, like a logger or something, on these failed and repairs. And, you know, if you're only interested in the past, you may be missing off some of your valuable data here. We do see, in some cases, if you're checking for multiple different validations, you might want to string a couple of these together to get exactly the right result that you need. So, okay, so we'll go back into this. Go to my Borg. Whoops, this one. And the dynamic schema. So we'll open up this one. Oops, try to open up this one.
So here we're going to have a look at how you might, you've got your data sitting in Oracle, and that's been great. It's a great warehouse and you're pulling data out of there all the time. But you may need to take that data out to, say, a format like AutoCAD, where you've got the engineering team wanting their drawings the way they're used to seeing them. So you need to be able to apply color, separate it out by layers, do some fancy stuff to your pretty Oracle data so that the AutoCAD can have more sense made of it. And so the way traditionally we've done that in FME is by using a workspace that's got a lot of transformers, where you might be setting FME color to a particular value based on an attribute value in your Oracle database. And so do you have the sample workspace for that shows the complexity that you could come up with? I don't remember. So anyway, traditionally that's what you would have done. You'd have had a workspace that was full of a lot of mapping transformers, mapping your data from source to destination. And what Steve's going to show you is the kind of workspace you can now put together that is using a transformer called the schema mapper to do that kind of mapping for you based on information that's sitting in an external file. So he has some data here sitting in an Oracle database. It's his, which feature types are you working with here, Steve? Oh, some of our city data. So he's got some bus stops and some city grid data and some city parks.
Yeah, and the idea in this workspace, we're reading many of these feature types in here, and we can see that we've got this one feature type holder that's actually dealing with all of those different feature types. So what's nice about that now is we've simplified our workspace and down from a multiple, like normally you would need to have at least 3 feature types here, but now we've got this one here that is going to read all those at the same time. And next we're going to feed those through the schema mapper, because we're going out from Oracle to a CAD file here, and we know that what's coming out of the Oracle file is not going to fit into the CAD file nicely. And what's even more important is the CAD users on the other end aren't going to see that CAD file like they would normally want to. So with the schema mapper, we can go through this and
Whoa, now that's pretty dramatic.
Yeah, is that because I have this open?
Could be. So anyway, let's leave this open for the moment, and we can talk about what you'd have in the CSV file that was going to do the mapping for you.
Restart that?
I don't know. Let's. How brave do you want to be?
Oh yeah, I'm brave. But so in here we can see what's happening. We've got our source attributes, our source features coming through, and the types of. I guess that's the the different types and what we want to write them out to.
That's right. So here, for instance, if you had a feature type that's in the roads feature type, and it happened to be called a primary route, then you would send it out to your destination to be on the C road center primary layer in your AutoCAD file, and you might also further down here assign it a color of 20 or a color of 10. So you're setting up your output to reflect what's in your input, but in a different, ready for a different format.
Yeah.
So just close that program down. Let's close the CSV down. Yeah, because the CSV file locks itself when you've got it open. So
let's go back up here, go to the schema mapper again. Okay, so we've recovered from that. So we'll just run that. And that's writing out to a dynamic. So we were taking those 3 features, and a couple of them were being split out into multiple features. We've got an error here. Why have we got an error? Can't see plus notes defined.
I don't know, Steve.
Yeah.
What have you done here?
I'm railroading myself.
There's nothing like going off topic when you're doing a live webinar.
Well, feature types to read. So let's just try. I think, which one was that?
Oh, I don't know, something to do with roads. Let's not worry about it because we don't have any roads in our source. So the point is that he's reading multiple feature types through one feature type source. He's writing multiple feature types out to one destination. If you could just scroll over a little bit and we can see the destination. And if you take a look at it, you'll see that it's a dynamic writer. He doesn't have the specifications for user and things like that. He's using all those from a dynamic output source.
Yeah, I moved a file last night. That's what's going on here. The schema table's not in there.
Okay, well, we can either try and fix it or we can move right along here.
Let's see about this.
Let's give it one more shot.
One more shot.
And then they'll be throwing tomatoes on the stage, so we better just...
Because we got a workspace resource down here. Yeah, so there it goes. It wrote out that time. So that was my bad for moving a file.
Can we take a look at the output and see that we've got color and things in it?
We'll go here. I don't have...
we'll be able to inspect it.
Inspect it, yeah.
Yeah.
So we're going to inspect it here. I don't know how flashy it's going to be. It's just the city grids. So you can see here our attributes on that, and our color's been set.
Yeah, so it would have picked
the AutoCAD layer has been set there too as well.
Yeah, so it picked up the layer and it picked up the color from our CSV file and said what layer it was to go on and what color it was to be joined on. And if we'd had roads and more interesting information, we'd have done that with other things as well.
Yeah.
Okay,
so let's close this up here. And we'll go look at a couple other ones. So we've got some...
your point cloud. We want to play with point cloud.
Well, first I was going to show you some loading of GeoRaster. So we've got that one. And that's basically, we're just selecting a one JPEG here, and we're writing out to the Oracle database. We're giving it a column name here, and then we can set the name of that out there, and in the database already now I've got a particular feature in there that I loaded yesterday, so I won't run through that one again. But you can see here's the Glenville raster that's been loaded into there.
Steve, could I get you to just open that workspace again, and let's just throw down a writer and show them what the different options are for Oracle for writing. So at the very top there you can go add a writer and just start to type in the word Oracle.
Yeah, that's a good...
And these are the different options that are available to you when you're writing. So you'll see we have a non-spatial writer, which we didn't look at, but that just writes regular tables. It works no differently to the spatial writer. We have the spatial GeoRaster writer, which is what Steve was just saying, would write rasters into your Oracle database. We've got the spatial object one, which was the one we've been working with sort of all along that does spatial data into your Oracle. And then we have a point cloud one.
Yep.
Which also writes into Oracle and writes into the Oracle supported point cloud format.
Yeah. I got the workspace that I was going to show you on that one is related to using the Zipster. So what we got is point clouds in here, and they're in a zip file. So if we come in here, you can see that we're pointing to a zip file here in that. And so we can have all those in a zip folder, and we can write them out to the LiDAR. And this one doesn't take too long to run, so I'll just make sure I got a new name on there. And not too long of a name. And as you know, once it's in the Oracle database, then there's a whole bunch of point cloud transformer tools you can work with within the FME as well. So that runs through and puts that up.
So it's reading through the zip file. It unzipped it at the beginning, read through the zip file, read each one of the XYZ files that was in there, Now, it's not only loaded them into Oracle, it's also directed them to the viewer for us. And perhaps we could just stay there at the viewer for a moment and show people that that's the other thing about the Data Inspector, is that you can fly around this data.
Yeah.
So he's got a little logo there for flying, and you can move that 3D data and view it in sort of a 3D viewer. So again, if you haven't used the Data Inspector, this is another reason for taking a look at it, is for looking at your 3D data.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll close that. So that's some GeoRaster and some point cloud loading. And now we'll come back out to here. And I'm going to switch over to another system where I have well, we'll go here. We'll look at the, if you're ever interested in looking at working with workspaces, so long-term transactions, that sort of stuff in here, we'll just make you aware of that when you're adding in the example. You got your Oracle workspace.
Yeah, somebody actually asked a question about Workspace Manager. So Workspace Manager, we fully support it, and you actually identify which workspace you want to work with as you connect to the database. So here, Steve's got a workspace set up, which is the live one, which is the,
yeah,
if he didn't have anything else, but he also, I saw one there somewhere.
Yeah, I'm writing out to this Steve test. I'm also reading in here, and what I got out of that is I've got this here, you know, I've got these two feature sets, and if I toggle between this particular one here that I made a change to it, I can see that one is my live and one is my other workspace that I had created. So that's how you can use Oracle to write to your different workspaces. Some people are getting into using long-term transaction. It's a pretty powerful way to be able to get data safely into the system and then be able to reconcile your data after the fact.
Cool.
Okay, let's bomb over to this system. Okay, so this system here, I've got a couple workspaces. I'm just going to show you, this is really just to try to touch base on how you can work with constraints. And in this particular case, what I'm writing out to are two tables. In the background, there is a foreign key between these tables. Now, it's all fine and dandy. You can write to these tables if you do it in the right order. So you can imagine your SQL command prompt. You insert your new pick list value in the table. So in this case here, oops, I didn't want that. I've got a pick list here. It's got 3 values in there. And then I got my other feature that's going to be tied with that with a status ID here. And what you need to keep in mind is the order you're writing in. Now, it does matter in FME what order your writers are here. In this particular case, I've got 2 writers. If I try to run this right now, I've got a creator that's inserting a record into that my feature table. And then I've got another creator that's creating a new record for the pick list. So what you're going to see down here is we should get back an error unless I didn't switch. Yeah, so we get failed insert into that my feature table, and that's because the integrity constraint is failed, have been violated, because this record in the pick list doesn't exist. But if I reorder that just by moving this up, I run that again, and now this time, because I'm writing that writer first, the record will exist, it's going to get committed, and the next writer will add that to it and go with it. So that's there. We can see in our log it's written that successfully and written 2 records, one to the pick list, the new pick list lookup, and one to the feature table. So if I come back to my database and refresh, I can see that I've got a new feature that's been inserted with a status ID of 4, and down here in this table my new status list has been abandoned or has been inserted as well. So that's one example of how you can work with constraints. The other example is being able to work with our, oops, I want this one up here. Yeah, is just being able to use this SQL statement to execute before and after. So we have about 6 minutes ago there, Robin.
Yep.
Where you alter the constraint and you disable it. And then that will allow you to write your data as you want and revalidate it, or do the checks at the end of it. In this particular workspace, what I've done is I'm writing out to the 2 tables still. I disable the constraints before I start. I write out to the tables, and then I enable it with this validate constraint again. So that allows it to check the data even at the end of it, and at least report back that you've got some errors. So if I run this workspace as is, it's going to go through with the constraints, disable them. Slow connecting. This error message can be safely warned, ignored, because what it's doing there is it's actually trying to use lowercase password, and then if it fails, it does uppercase password. Okay, so now if we look at that, we can see that we've got a new pick list value that's in repair. It's been added, and that's been added. The new record's been in there as well. Some of my interesting comments there. Oracle rocks with FME.
So yeah, so there's some examples, and again, you'll be getting these workspaces in tomorrow or the next day. They'll show up on the website along with the recording of the webinar, so that you can make use of these as examples for yourselves. I mean, none of them will work because you can't connect to our databases, but they're good little examples to start working with in terms of your own usage. And just remember again, always with databases, is that you have to open up these navigator pane settings, because this is where the guts of the settings and the work that you're doing to make this stuff happen is. Open them up and open up the advanced and check that you've got everything set the way you want it set. Yep. So just as a last example to go out with a big bang, we've got a workspace here that's actually reading from that point cloud data that we loaded in. It's also reading from that georaster data that we put in, and it's doing some clipping on that data to clip out an area of interest. We've been given a project site as a design file, and so we're clipping those two, very easily done in FME with a regular clipper against those specialized formats of point cloud and raster. And then we take that, we drape the ortho photo over the point clouds, create tins, do all sorts of fancy stuff, have it come out in a PDF file so that you can send it to the management team and say, this is what it will look like when you've finished with it. And so we're using a common output format, some very sophisticated source formats, and that little workspace ran pretty quickly.
Yep, that's right.
It was finished long before I was done.
Yeah, so there it is in the final PDF. So, okay, so yeah, so that's just kind of trying to tie everything together that we were working with in the Oracle database. You know, this here project site could have very easily been a table in the Oracle database where you had along with your point clouds and your rasters. You would have been all too happy to have it all there. So we'll just
Great.
go back
to this. So let's just finish off our little slideshow here, and then I think we'll have run out of time.
Pretty close.
So one last thought was that if you have created your Oracle tables correctly and you've got a unique index on them and a unique attribute index, you can just pull those tables right into ArcMap. With ArcGIS 10.1, the way they've changed the connection to the enterprise databases, you don't even need to have configured SDE. You can just use a database connection right through to your Oracle table, pull it into ArcMap, and then we've found you can do things like export that out to a geodatabase, make the changes that you want, and then use FME to put those changes back into your Oracle table. So there's some pretty powerful stuff happening with that integration between Oracle and ArcMap and using FME on the sidelines.
Yeah.
So we've run out of time for a question and answer period, but I noticed Mark has been really hot to trot with the questions that have come in. So if we've missed some of you, please be patient and you'll get an answer later on today. So yeah. It's good you kept him busy. He likes to be busy.
Okay, and we got some upcoming webinars that you may be interested in. June 19th, got the open data. I think Laura's, and is it Laura and Don?
Probably Laura and Don are involved in that one. So they've been working with FME in the Socrata format. Yeah,
and then we have June 26th, we got some Oracle training coming up with a live instructor, which will be Robin.
Or Steve, depending who draws the long straw. Yeah. And that's a 4-hour training. We do it online. But we provide you with a machine that's got Oracle configured on it and some FME. So if you're interested in learning more about how to work with Oracle, that's a really good session. We go into some of these concepts a little bit more, well, A, in more time, and B, a little bit more deeply, so that you've got the chance to work with this stuff.
Yeah, and we certainly invite you to go visit our recorded webinars. Robin and Mark did the PostGIS, the SQL Server one, if you're working with other database formats, and they've shown dived into other areas a little bit more than I did today, or we did today.
And particularly if you go look at the PostGIS one, we did a lot more of the beginner stuff, how to connect to the database, how to build a workspace, you know, those kind of things. So there was a lot more of the introductory stuff in the PostGIS one.
Yeah.
So it all works the same, whether you're connecting to PostGIS or Oracle. It's just merely a matter of picking the right reader writer and picking your connection information.
Yeah,
so,
that's right. And we get lots of questions just simply how to connect to some of your databases if you're using TNS names file or if you're using a direct connect and that sort of stuff. So one last thing here, I guess, in closing, we're at the bell, 9 o'clock.
So we have a little bit of a competition. You can, well, we're giving it away now, but it is free training. So if you want some more information on our free training, just click on one of the buttons here and someone will follow up with you afterwards and let you know what courses are coming up when. And so please do that, and I'll just wait for a few more minutes so that a few more people can vote so they don't miss out. But I think basically everybody gets the same information. So.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, so I'll close that one off.
Yeah, and just contact us if you didn't get a chance to vote there and you're interested in it. We'll definitely be coming out to you. It's a good opportunity for you to follow up with us as well once you get your email, all right?
And so thank you very much. So if you've got any questions, feel free to contact us through the support line, through the support page on our website. If you've got sales information questions on pricing, contact info@safe.com. And then, wow, Steve, you're giving out our personal email addresses here.
Oh, absolutely.
Yep, if you've got questions.
We're wide open here at SAFE.
If you've got questions on today's webinar, because I realize we threw a lot of stuff at you very quickly, feel free to get back to us.
Yep. Great.
Okay.
All right.
Thank
Take care until next time.